If you've ever wondered which old trawlers built to survive storms actually deserve that reputation, here's a mind-bender. The most reliable ones were built decades ago, before modern tech, fancy hulls, and marketing hype. They survived by brute strength, smart design, and old-school engineering. However, what most people get wrong is assuming only the big, famous trawlers could handle rough weather. The twist? Many of the real storm warriors were under 50 feet, humble, rugged, and tested by brutal conditions. And today, you're getting the exact 15 models fishermen still trust when the sky turns ugly. If trawlers had a safe pair of hands award, the Grand Banks 42 Classic would win it every single year. This thing is basically the Toyota Land Cruiser of the sea. Slow, steady, built like it was carved from a block of teak, and somehow still stylish decades later. The hull design barely changed from the early 70s to the 1990s, because, well, when something works, you don't mess with it. When the waves stack up and the sky turns the color of bad news, the 42 doesn't try to fight the ocean, it just settles in, drops the bow, and does that stoic trawler thing. We ride at 8 knots, and nothing you say will change that. Owners love how it tracks in a following sea, like it's on rails even when everyone else is slamming. And then there's the engine room, twin diesels you can literally sit beside, understand, and fix without needing a laptop or an exorcism. That's why these old Grand Banks still cross coastlines today, often looking better than the people on board. The Defever 44 is what happens when a naval architect famous for designing tuna clippers decides, yeah, let's make something for the cruising folks too. The result is a 44-footer that looks friendly enough at the dock, but reveals its true nature the moment the weather turns. A miniature cargo ship with sofas. This hull is all about that deep 4-foot and long, confidence-inspiring keel. When the sea gets sloppy and your coffee starts threatening mutiny, the Defever just shoulders forward like it's pushing through an annoying crowd at an airport. It doesn't panic, it doesn't pound, it just keeps going at 7 or 8 knots like a stubborn old uncle who refuses to be rushed. Owners also swear by the interior layout. Everything is oversized for long passages. Big tanks, big storage, big galley, big areas to hide from your spouse after 6 hours of navigating in the rain. The 44 offshore cruiser isn't cute or flashy, but if you want an honest boat that behaves when the sky plots against you, this is your girl. Now this is a proper go-anywhere trawler. The Kadey-Krogen 42 isn't pretending to be seaworthy, it was literally drawn to cross oceans without drama. With its round bilge, full displacement hull, and long keel, it moves through the water like a chilled-out submarine that's decided to stay on the surface today. When the chop gets nasty, the 42 doesn't bang or slap, it just does this gentle, predictable roll that long-distance cruisers call comfort motion. Translation: you won't be grabbing every handrail like a parkour athlete while moving from the helm to the galley, and with a single diesel engine, it sips fuel so slowly that some owners swear the fuel gauge is broken. But the real magic is in its attitude. Point a Krogen 42 at the horizon and it basically says, "Cool, I'll see you in about 900 nautical miles." It's the boat people buy when they finally get serious. Serious about passagemaking, serious about safety, and serious about ignoring everyone else blasting past them at 25 knots. The Marine Trader 44 is the kind of trawler that shows up to a storm like an old fisherman with a cigarette hanging off his lip, muttering, seen worse. Built heavily in Taiwan during the 70s and 80s, these boats were over-spec'd for their price range, with thick fiberglass, heavy keels, and layouts that were actually designed by people who lived on boats, not architects who lived in offices. When weather gets messy, the 44DC semi-displacement hull shines. It's not a speed demon. 8 knots on a good day, 7.5 knots on a realistic one, but it's consistent. Quartering seas, following seas, the boat doesn't really care. Its long keel and weight distribution keep it marching like a freight train that refuses to derail. Inside, these boats feel like floating vintage apartments. Wood everywhere, warm lighting, and cabins you can actually stand up in. And while marine traders sometimes get unfair teasing for their character, the truth is thousands of owners used them for long-haul cruising because they were dependable, comfortable, and surprisingly seaworthy for the price. This is the boat you buy when you want a storm-tested trawler without putting billionaire-level dents in your savings. If you spent any time around used trawlers, you've probably bumped your shins on a CHB-36 at least once. These Taiwanese-built icons were everywhere in the late 1970s and 80s because they offered something wild for the time. The Grand Banks look, without the Grand Banks bill. And guess what? A lot of them turned out to be rock-solid seaboats. The CHB-36 runs a semi-displacement hull with an honest 7 to 8 knot cruise, but the boat's real charm comes out when the chop kicks up. Thanks to its deep keel and a low center of gravity, it doesn't flop around like many light cruisers of the era. It tracks surprisingly well in a sloppy following sea, something many small trawlers still struggle with today. And sure, some joinery is quirky, and the wiring sometimes looks like it was installed by an enthusiastic octopus, but these boats lasted. Owners ran them up and down the Pacific Northwest, across the Great Loop and through Bahamas crossings without drama. A CHB-36 is like that old pair of boots. Maybe not fancy, maybe not pretty, but they always get you home. The Albin 36 is one of those boats that quietly built a cult following, especially among cruisers who wanted something seaworthy but not too huge. And this hull, shockingly capable for its size. It comes from the Swedish commercial tradition, which probably explains why it behaves more like a small ship than a leisure boat. When the wind pipes up and the sea turns into washing machine chaos, the Albin 36 just digs in. It's long, narrow, and efficient, slicing rather than smashing through waves. That gives it a gentler motion than many stocky trawlers, which is a blessing when you're trying to sip coffee without baptizing yourself in it. The aft cabin layout also makes it an excellent liveaboard for long trips. Real storage, real ventilation, real separation between spaces, and under the deck the old-school diesel setups are famously dependable, often running forever with nothing more than regular oil changes and the occasional pep talk. If you want a small but serious trawler that can handle rough days without acting dramatic, the Albin 36 is a sleeper pick. The Nordic Tug 32 isn't technically a classic Taiwanese trawler, but trust me, this little workhorse absolutely earns its place on a list of storm-proof legends. Born in the late 1980s, it blends salty tugboat looks with the DNA of a commercial vessel. Translation: it's cute at the dock and an absolute bulldog when the weather loses its mind. With a single diesel and a full keel, the NT32 just tracks. It doesn't wander, it doesn't shimmy, it doesn't decide to invent new dance moves in a following sea. Owners rave about its ability to punch through chop at 7 to 8 knots and maintain direction like it's on autopilot. And because it's heavier than it looks, the motion is surprisingly settled for a 32-footer. Inside, everything feels smartly laid out, because Scandinavian-inspired efficiency is kind of the brand. You get big windows, warm wood, and a helm that actually makes sense. Plus, the hull is so fuel efficient that many owners do long coastal passages without ever breaking a sweat. If you want a smaller trawler that behaves like a bigger one when the storms roll in, the Nordic Tug 32 is your little tank. If you know, you know. The Willard 36 is one of the most respected cult classic trawlers ever built, the kind of boat that hardcore passage makers whisper about like a secret handshake. Willard Marine built commercial lifeboats, Navy craft, and serious workboats, and the Voyager 36 comes straight from that DNA. This thing is pure full displacement, with round bilges and a long protective keel. It cruises at a monk-like 6 to 7 knots, but when the sea turns angry, the Willard 36 does something magical. It settles into a rhythm that feels almost meditative. No pounding, no unpredictable lurching, just smooth, predictable motion that keeps your nerves calm even when the forecast isn't. And because Willard built these hulls like they expected you to smack into something someday, the fiberglass is thick and the engineering is brutally simple. Access to the single diesel is excellent, and many of these boats are still crossing oceans 40 plus years later with the original engines. If your dream is a go anywhere, anytime, in any mood classic trawler, the Willard 36 is the connoisseur's choice. The Gulfstar 44 is one of those boats people underestimate until they actually ride out weather on one. Built in the late 70s and early 80s, Gulfstar had a reputation for strong hulls and honest semi-displacement designs, and the 44 Trawler MY is the standout. Its hull is long, lean, and surprisingly efficient for a boat of its size. When chop stacks up, the 44 doesn't get pushy or skittish like lighter boats. It holds a course beautifully, especially when running a steady 8-knot cruise. Owners love how forgiving it is. You don't need to be a salty sea dog with 40 years of experience to keep it under control. And then there's the interior. Gulfstar went big. Big saloon windows, big cabins, and layouts that make long trips feel like home. This boat wasn't just built to survive weather, it was built to allow you to ride it out in comfort. The Gulfstar 44 is the perfect mix of classic trawler toughness, and my partner won't complain about living aboard this. The Californian 42 LRC is one of those boats that quietly became a legend without ever showing off. LRC literally stands for Long Range Cruiser, and trust me, they didn't slap that name on lightly. These hulls are heavy, full-bodied, and built for people who want to be somewhere far away without panicking about fuel or weather. The 42 semi-displacement hull has a lovely way of softening nasty chop. Instead of slamming, it just lifts, sighs, and rolls over like an old prize fighter who's been in the ring too many times to flinch. Its long keel and chunky bow help it keep pointed where you want it, even when the sea wants you going somewhere else entirely. Inside, it feels like a cozy 1980s waterfront apartment. Tons of wood, a proper galley, and an engine room that's shockingly accessible. Twin diesels sip fuel, not chug, and with big tanks you can run coastal passages comfortably. It's the kind of boat where bad weather becomes an inconvenience, not a crisis. If you want a trustworthy cruiser built before marketing departments took over everything, the Californian 42 LRC is a gem. The Universal 36 is a bit of a if-you-know-you-know trawler, overshadowed by the Grand Banks and CHBs of the era, but quietly one of the most dependable mid-sized trawlers ever pumped out of Taiwan in the late 70s and 80s. Universal Marine built thick, overbuilt hulls, and the 36 was their sweet spot. This boat has that classic full-keel, semi-displacement profile that makes it behave far better in weather than its modest size suggests. Put it through wind against tide chop and it just digs in, tracks straight, and keeps the bow down like a polite little ship that understands manners. Owners love the interior layout, big saloon windows, decent engine access, and a cabin arrangement that actually feels practical for extended cruising. The diesel engines in most of these boats run forever, and parts are still easy to find because they used simple, reliable power plants. If you want a mid-sized trawler that won't let you down when the weather flips from calm to chaos, the Universal 36 might be the most underrated pick on this whole list. The Monk 36 is a boat with a personality, and that personality is Calm Uncle, who has seen every kind of storm and refuses to raise his voice. Designed by Ed Monk Sr. and later built by Island Gypsy Queenship, the 36 takes classic Northwest trawler DNA and shrinks it into something manageable and insanely seaworthy. The hull is semi-displacement with a long keel, giving it excellent directional stability. In rough water, it doesn't get twitchy or nervous. It holds a line and settles into predictable motion, which is a blessing when you're trying to keep your lunch where it belongs. The Monk 36 isn't fast, but what it gives you is total confidence. Inside, the boat feels warm, practical, and surprisingly spacious for its footprint. The classic teak interiors age beautifully, and the engine room, usually housing a single or twin simple diesels, is a mechanic's dream. If you want a trawler that feels like it was built by people who actually cruised in the Pacific Northwest's moody weather, the Monk 36 is your guy. The Mainship 34 Mark I is basically the blue-collar hero of old trawlers. When it launched in the late 70s, it wasn't pretending to be fancy. It was affordable, simple, and ridiculously tough for the price. And that's exactly why so many of them are still cruising today, long after some pricier boats have retired to marina graveyards. The 34 runs a semi-displacement hull with a single engine that sips fuel like it's on a strict diet. At 7 to 8 knots, it'll take you through weather most modern cruisers avoid, and because it's relatively narrow and efficient, it tends to cut through chop instead of bouncing over it like a skipping stone. Many owners praise how surprisingly dry the ride is for a mid-sized trawler. Inside, you'll find the classic no-nonsense Mainship layout: practical galley, big windows, and just enough space to live aboard without stepping on each other's toes every 5 minutes. Nothing fancy, but everything that matters. The Mark I is the perfect choice if you want a reliable storm-handling trawler without spending Grand Banks money or signing up for Grand Banks maintenance. The Sea Ranger 45 is one of those big-feeling boats that manages to stay within the sub-50-foot rule while delivering the poise of something larger. Built in Taiwan in the 1980s, these hulls share bloodlines with other legendary yards. Thick fiberglass, long keels, and a design language borrowed straight from commercial vessels. Where this boat shines is in heavy chop. Its bow is tall and proud, meaning spray gets pushed outward instead of upward, keeping the deck surprisingly dry even when the sea wants to baptize you. And because it carries its weight low, the roll motion is slow and comfortable rather than quick and nauseating. Owners often call this the steady eddy of 45-foot trawlers. It doesn't complain, it doesn't startle, and it doesn't need constant attention to stay on course. Twin diesels give good redundancy, and access is far better than you'd expect from an older Asian-built trawler. For anyone wanting a bigger, roomier trawler that still behaves well when the sky turns angry, the Sky Ranger 45 is a sleeper hit. The Island Gypsy 40 is one of the most charming, capable, and criminally underrated trawlers ever built. Kongo Halvorsen gave these boats an almost yacht-like finish, but underneath the polished teak and pretty lines is a legitimate little beast of a cruiser. The semi-displacement hull is classic Halvorsen. Long keel, deep forefoot, and a shape that stays predictable even when the conditions stop being polite. The IG-40 has this steady, gentle motion that makes it a favorite with liveaboard couples and offshore weekend warriors alike. It's not fast, 8 knots is the happy place, but it's incredibly honest. Step inside and you'll see why so many of these boats have dedicated followings. Big windows, airy saloons, and warm woodwork make the interior feel bigger than the numbers suggest. Meanwhile, the mechanical side stays refreshingly simple, the kind of engine room where you actually look forward to doing your own maintenance. If you want a classic under 50-foot trawler that blends comfort, elegance, and real rough weather credibility, the Island Gypsy 40 is a perfect finale to this list. At the end of the day, these old trawlers weren't built to impress marinas, they were built to survive. They were designed by people who expected bad weather, long crossings, and real-world use, not showroom lighting. And if you've watched this far, you now know exactly why these classics earned reputations that modern boats still haven't matched. But if you want to see another list of old boats that were built like tanks, then you need to check out my video on 15 old boats that were made to last forever. That one's packed with legends that refuse to die, even after decades of abuse. And hey, if you enjoyed this breakdown, Hit like, drop a comment telling me which trawler you trust in a storm, and subscribe for more real-world boat deep dives.